Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Lymphoma Research Foundation's What Partners Should Know webinar. I'm Hope Avalone, and I'm the Senior Manager of Patient Education Programs here at the Lymphoma Research Foundation. So during today's webinar, you'll hear from an expert speaker, and you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. And you can submit those questions at any time through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll address as many as we can before the end of the program today. And as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. At the end of the program, you'll be prompted to complete a program evaluation. We do encourage you to complete this evaluation as we like to incorporate your feedback into future programming. But before we begin, I also wanted to address one other change that you might notice in this webinar. In order to reflect the fact that the term caregiver may not accurately describe everyone who provides different types of assistance to a patient undergoing treatment, the foundation on our end will now primarily be using the term care partner to encompass the diverse range of support that these individuals may provide. So that's just a change that you may notice. But with that, let's get started. Thank you again to each of you for taking the time to join us on today's webinar. We'd like to first thank our sponsors of this webinar. Thank you to Genentech, Lilly, and Merck. At the Lymphoma Research Foundation, our mission is to realize the promise of science, to eradicate lymphoma, and serve the community touched by this disease. And all of our work is led by our scientific advisory board, which is a group of 45 leading lymphoma experts from around the country. And in addition to today's program, we have a variety of other programs and services available for you. So the foundation has free comprehensive disease guides and fact sheets, which can be ordered or downloaded on our website at lymphoma.org. We also offer a variety of other in-person and virtual educational programming so that you can continue learning about the latest updates throughout the year. And as part of our digital resources, we have an award-winning mobile app called Focus on Lymphoma. And this app provides helpful disease content as well as unique tools to help patients better manage their lymphoma. The app is available free of charge in both the Apple App Store and in Google Play. And in addition, the foundation also offers a wide range of support services. So one example here is our helpline, which serves to complement our patient education programs as a resource for both patients and care partners as well. The helpline has master's level trained staff who provide individualized information on all types of lymphomas, as well as information on treatment options, clinical trial navigation, and connections to resources such as financial assistance. We also offer a peer support program called the Lymphoma Support Network. And through the Lymphoma Support Network, we can connect patients and care partners with others who have been through similar experiences for emotional support. And lastly, I also wanted to briefly highlight our upcoming West Coast Lymphoma Workshop in Los Angeles. Our lymphoma workshops are one-day educational programs that provide the latest information about lymphoma, current treatment options, and patient and care partner support issues. This workshop will include specific breakout sessions for each subtype of lymphoma. It will be held on Saturday, September 14th in Los Angeles, as I mentioned, and you can view the agenda for this program and also register at lymphoma.org/West Coast Workshop. For now, we have a wonderful program planned for you today, and I am honored to introduce our speaker, Dr. Kelly Schaefer. Dr. Schaefer is a licensed clinical psychologist with expertise in psycho-oncology. She is an associate professor in the Center for Behavioral Health and Technology at the University of Virginia School of Medicine, where her research focuses on cancer caregivers and care partners. Thank you, Dr. Schaefer, for speaking at our program today, and I will now turn the talk over to you.
Thank you so much, Hope, for the kind introduction. I will go ahead and share my slide. Looking good?
Looks good.
Great. Thank you so much again for having me here today. I'm really excited to speak with you all. I will, over the next 40-ish minutes or so, just to set the stage and let you know what you can expect from me before we get into some question and answers. Will start with some what I think are pretty important disclaimers for the beginning of this talk. I'll talk a little bit about that language of care partner, caregiver, and how that may apply to you or not, and then share some skills that can be helpful for care partners, as well as you'll see self-care, which we'll address. There's an asterisk there because there's some important context around that. As well as end with a few more resources, although you've already seen all of the great resources that the Lymphoma Research Foundation has to offer. So to start off, I just want to be really extremely clear from the outset that you are the expert in your life. I will share some thoughts and ideas and resources that I've seen be helpful for other care partners in my work as a clinical psychologist and as a researcher in cancer caregiving. But not all of those are going to apply to you. Not all of them are going to appeal or work for you. And so my hope for my talk today is that there might be one thing that really resonates with you. But again, only you can really know what's going to work well for you in your life. And then a second important disclaimer is that I want to recognize that you're often put in really impossible situations. Our healthcare systems are really broken. Care is really expensive. We don't have enough healthcare providers or trained support personnel. So you and your friends and family are often sort of put in to fill a lot of these gaps, often without training or being asked or being thanked. So I want to be really clear that people who say like, you just need to practice self-care, or here are some tips for you to handle this better, without acknowledging all of these systemic problems that make being a care partner really difficult is nothing short of gaslighting. And by that, I mean, it's a way of making you think that there's something wrong with you, your resilience, your capacity, or even sort of your love and care for the person that you're caring for, when really there's something wrong with the system. So I want to sort of start by sort of illustrating that with reading a quote from this caregiving memoir called Already Toast by Kate Washington. It's a wonderful and important book. She describes her experience caring for her husband, who was diagnosed with a rare T-cell lymphoma and who received a stem cell transplant. And this is how she starts the book. On that hot day in July of 2016, I was so exhausted by the caring grind that I could no longer cope. To my embarrassment, I couldn't stop weeping or even look up. I'd always tried to project competence with Brad's physicians so they would take my questions seriously, but by 10 a.m., I was already worn out. I'd spent the morning packing lunches, running our kids to summer camp, loading a heavy wheelchair into the car, wheeling my frail husband across hot asphalt, and picking up a dozen new meds from the cancer center pharmacy, all on not enough sleep and with the knowledge that bills, laundry, and plenty else were waiting for me at home. My good caregiver mask dropped. As I broke down, the oncologist chided me for not taking good enough care of myself. If I didn't, he said, how could I take care of my husband? So again, I will be presenting some strategies and resources that I hope will help you, but they're really inadequate individual level solutions that suggest you solve for a problem that really can only be solved by large scale systemic changes in law, healthcare, and culture. But with these disclaimers out of the way, let's move along. And hopefully you will be able to pick up something that might make your role a little bit easier. So I want to start with that language of care partner and caregiver. So these are sort of two different terms, and people resonate with these terms differently. So the LRF has made sort of a clear choice to move towards care partner. You're going to hear me say caregiver quite a bit, and I hope you'll forgive me. I know these labels, people resonate with, they don't resonate with it. It could be very personal. So I hope you'll forgive me if I don't do a great job at sticking at care partner. Last time I looked at the National Cancer Institute's definition, I like this definition because I think it gives a really nice, concise definition of caregiving, which is, are you helping a loved one through cancer treatment? If you say yes, you're a caregiver or care partner. More specifically, when we say giving care, that includes a lot of different things. So that can be practical tasks like driving someone to appointments, helping manage insurance issues, or helping a person dress and bathe. Medical tasks like helping manage medications or wound care, and emotional tasks. So being the shoulder to cry on, helping someone problem solve and walk through worries. I like these definitions because it makes it really clear that all of these different aspects, all of the different aspects that caregiving and being a care partner, all those different things are included, and they're all really important to patient care. And when we think about, again, the care partner versus caregiver, I think about this as what makes you feel, what do you feel more comfortable with? And some people don't want to be defined really by either of these terms at all, and prefer to think about the care that they provide more in terms of, a familial sense, like I'm a son and this is what I do, or, I'm this person's spouse, and so this is what we do. And I think, all of that, there are pros and cons, and you can sort of work out what works best for you. The only concern is do think about care partner and caregiver and how that might fit for you, because sometimes folks will miss out on resources and community because they see things like tabs on websites that say care partner or caregiver, or there's the caregiver support group at the hospital, and sometimes folks who would sort of technically qualify for those kinds of resources will say, oh, that's not me, I'm not a caregiver. But again, according to these kinds of definitions, I bet many of you on this call would qualify for those. And so just think about sort of how these different sort of terms and definitions apply to you, help you feel more empowered, help connect you to resources and things that you need, or don't. And in that vein, we'll talk about how thoughts, feelings, and behaviors all are intertwined, and how that can be useful when we're thinking about coping and sort of our approach to different situations. So why start here? I'm a clinical psychologist, so I always start here. This triangle is really the foundation of everything that I do in my work. If you're familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy, this triangle might look familiar to you. At its most basic, it just reminds us that the way that we think affects how we feel emotionally, which affects what we do, which in turn affects how we think. And all of those relationships work in reverse as well. So what we do affects how we feel, which in turn affects how we think. All of this is intertwined. So I'll start with the basics just to make sure we're all on the same page moving forward. So thoughts are really things that we tell ourselves. They're words and stories that we experience in our minds. These thoughts can be something like, I am a wife, care partner, and tennis player, or I've done everything wrong today. Just a couple examples. So behaviors are what we do, our actions and our communication and how we do those things. And sometimes it can also be helpful to think about the things that we aren't doing and aren't saying as well. And then last, our feelings. So these are our emotions, and they have two qualities, type and intensity. I think it's really important to emphasize that emotions are not inherently good or inherently bad. It really just depends on the impact that they're having on your life, your ability to do the things that you want and need to do. Emotions are really useful. They are loaded with information, and they do a really good job of getting us to do and act in certain ways. And that actually tends to be really helpful. So, that phrase of sort of trust your gut. That's a phrase because feelings have so much information that are packed into them. And so each of these different sort of big emotions have certain sets of actions that really go with them that make sense in a lot of different situations. So, for example, sad, you've lost something important to you. It sort of calls on you to slow down and pulls in our social network to help us recuperate. Mad, reaction to a threat. You're activated, you're ready to fight. Happy, something was good. Let's make that happen again. Afraid, I'm anxious. I want to avoid that thing. Something could be dangerous, keeps me away from that. Or disgusted, something is unsanitary, so I need to avoid it or get it out of my system. So we can see how all of those things can be really useful. Where we should keep an eye out for is if you're feeling really stuck in a particular emotion or reacting with an intensity that you feel like is really out of proportion to a particular situation. And so when that happens, when it's important to you to sort of to change how you're feeling in a moment or at a certain period of time, what can you do about it? I don't know about you, but if I've been feeling really sad, just saying, feel happy, that doesn't work well for me. I wish it did. That would be convenient. But we can't actually directly influence feelings. So we have to kind of go about it through a roundabout way, through thoughts and behaviors. So another sort of example of that is, imagine you wanted to feel cold. I don't know where you all are calling in from, but it's been really hot where I am. So cooling off would be nice. So I can't just make myself cool off. I can't just be cold. But I could think really hard about a snowy day or imagine myself taking a polar plunge. Or I could do something like go stand in front of my office freezer. So same sort of thing. If you're feeling really overwhelmed, really stuck in sadness, stuck in stress or anger, and it's important to you to sort of shift that, here's a couple of ways you can get at that. So through thoughts, the first step through influencing feeling through thoughts is to categorize them. So again, thoughts are just words and stories we experience in our mind. That means they're not necessarily true. They don't necessarily reflect who we are, and we don't even necessarily have to listen to them. So when you're feeling really overwhelmed, it can help to sort of stop, write down your thoughts, and really kind of see what's going on. It can really slow things down. And take a look at what the evidence says. So one way to categorize thoughts is that they can be relatively true, meaning when we look at the evidence of what's going on around us, most of the evidence really backs that up, or relatively not true, meaning most of the evidence really isn't supporting these thoughts. And then we can also think about how our thoughts, again, are affecting what we're doing and how we're feeling. So thoughts can be mostly helpful, meaning they sort of help us do the things that we want and need to do and help us feel either positive or at least neutral. Or they can be mostly hurtful, meaning they make us feel really crummy and they get in the way of us acting in healthy, helpful ways. So we hope that most of our thoughts fall in that true and helpful quadrant. But often when we're feeling really stuck really badly, there's some not true and hurtful thoughts that are at work. And when that's the case, look for an alternative thought, an alternative way of looking at a situation, one that fits the evidence and one that is helpful. A way that helps me do that is to think about, what if, I swapped shoes with someone else was in my position, a friend, what would I tell them? So for example, if I was running late this morning and I thought, I've done everything wrong today, I am a failure. If I looked at the evidence for that, it's hard to imagine that I would have done 100% of things wrong today. And I definitely wouldn't tell a friend that they were a failure over sort of one sort of error. So a more true and helpful thought could be, I was late to this appointment, but there was an accident. I couldn't plan for that, and I'm usually on time. And so we can think about how that would really affect my feelings and what I did a lot differently than that first thought. So sort of similarly for behaviors, we talked earlier about how feelings do a really good job of getting us to act a certain way. And sometimes that's okay. Again, that's important information, and sometimes it's important to listen to our minds and bodies. But if you're feeling really stuck or trapped, you can think about, what if I just did something that I don't really feel like doing, but I think is healthy? What if I just did it anyway? So for example, if you're feeling really sad, really down, really stuck in that, it's natural to want to isolate, to be by yourself, to rest, to recuperate. You might not feel like calling that really funny friend of yours, but what if you did that anyway? You might find that they really pick you up, make you laugh, and brighten your mood. How about if you're feeling really embarrassed about asking someone for help, or worried that they might say no or feel put out? If it's really important, what if you tried asking anyway? You might find that they're really happy to help, or we're looking for a way to support you, and that feeds back onto the way that you think about the people around you and asking for help. So all of these things can really fit in together. And I know that this sounds pretty simplistic, but I have seen folks who get really curious about these relationships, that I've seen this little triangle help a lot of people. And those, especially those, again, who are getting curious, willing to sort of peek into what's going on for them and try some experiments to see how changing one of these aspects can influence the other. And this background can also help us better understand some of the other aspects that I'll talk about today. So for instance, asking for and accepting help. This is one place where there's also a lot of sort of self-judgments around, thoughts about how I should feel, how I should think, or how I should act. But there are going to be times where you need help. And we know that folks who support someone with care often report feeling really isolated and alone. So activating and identifying sort of a network that might be around you can help make the role that you are in more possible and less lonely. And I know that, that's pretty obvious. And if it were just that easy, everyone would be doing it. So what kinds of things get in the way of folks asking for, reaching out, and having a hard time accepting help? There's some cultural context that plays in here, and I encourage you to think about how this pertains to you or doesn't pertain to you. And these different aspects can really influence our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors around help seeking. So one is sort of how you were raised in terms of your sort of feelings of responsibility and value to yourself and your family, whether you're more individualistic or more familistic. And then also sort of our gender role expectations and the sort of responsibilities and values of being a man versus a woman. And none of these things are inherently good or inherently bad. Just, again, how they influence us can be helpful or not so helpful. So let's take a look at some examples here. Again, that pesky triangle. Here's sort of a positive influence of individualism. So let's say a home health aide is running late. You can't leave your loved ones, but your kids need to get to the school bus, and you need help. So someone might think, I need help. If I ask my neighbor, they're free to say yes or no. My ask isn't going to put them out because it's up to them to look out for their best interests. So that person probably feels neutral, positive. What they're going to do, they're probably going to make that ask. Can you walk the kids down the street and wait with them until they get picked up? And maybe that neighbor says yes, they'd love to, and that makes this care partner feel like, I'm going to ask again. That was really successful. Maybe the person says no, they can't this morning, but I really do want to help you other mornings, so please keep me in mind. Again, I have an opportunity to identify a network around you. So let's look at a negative influence of individual. Same situation, but someone else might think, I should be able to do this all on my own. I shouldn't have to ask for help if I was really on top of things. If I had those kinds of thoughts, I would feel really stressed, sad, upset. And I probably wouldn't ask for help. And so I missed an opportunity to see who around me is available and willing to help. And I probably would end up feeling more alone. And again, familism, same thing, can have positive or negative influences. So same situation, but someone in a really sort of familistic sort of family who places a lot of emphasis on respect and care for the family might think, actually my cousin might be really happy for the opportunity to help us. This is what we do, and I'm sure he'd love to come help with the kids. So again, neutral, positive, and probably makes that specific ask. But on the flip side, you can imagine if someone sort of felt like they had to do everything to, be a good daughter or a good son, that again would probably really get in the way and make things challenging, and probably feel really stuck and isolated. Same thing with gender roles. In the US, women are often expected to provide care, expected that caring will be natural for women, and that women are willing to sacrifice and sort of put their needs behind others. And there are some really beautiful aspects of that, and there are also ways that can really work against women by overloading them with care, feeling really obligated to accept that overload, and a lot of guilt and shame around acknowledging and meeting, their own needs. And that doesn't mean that this doesn't negatively affect men either. So men sort of not so expected to provide care. It's not expected to be natural. And so this can really work against men by making them think they're not going to do things right, get a lot of judgment or confusion from outsiders or even healthcare providers, since it's just more traditionally associated with women. So these kinds of things are all to say that we have a lot of sort of templates for thoughts that are already baked into us by the time we get to adults, just by how we're raised and the sort of the culture around us. So it can make changing what we do really difficult. And acknowledging all of that, here's a couple of different ideas for helping start establishing a network around you. So start early. Brainstorm a list of specific things that could be helpful and specific people who could be helpful, and then matching those up. So for instance, if you think like take kids to the movies would be helpful, mow the lawn, connect me with information about something. All of these are are pretty different tasks. And so sort of matching them with the right person. So a close friend of yours can take your kids out once a month. A neighbor can mow the lawn every other week. A social worker at the hospital can help connect you to resources. Once you've matched those things up, make that specific ask. So write down language that is specific and can help you. Practice it. All of those things can really help if this is new for you. So this is an example of wording that would work well for me, might work better or less for you. But for instance, it would mean a lot to me if you would take, Billy to a movie sometime this month so he can get a break. Would you be willing to help me with that? So it's very specific. It sets everyone up for success there. This both you as the asker and the person you're asking. And then be ready. You can, when you have this list, you can sort of bring those out of your back pocket when you get the very well-meaning questions of, how can I help? Or, please let me know what I can do for you. I know that those statements are always well meant, but it does put the onus on you to sort of come up with something for people to help you with. But again, if you have that sort of specific list, be ready to pull one of those things out. Like, next time you go to Walmart, do you mind if you can remember to text me and offer to pick something up? That would be really helpful. Something like that. And again, if this is making you sort of uncomfortable or sort of just feels like this is outside of your comfort range, I get it. And I would just bring us back to that triangle again of thoughts, feelings, behavior. Encourage you to get curious about what's going on. What are sort of the thoughts, the words or stories that you're hearing in your head? What are the emotions that you're feeling, and how do those, what do those emotions tell you about your thoughts? And then what would it be like to try out one of these steps anyway, even if you feel sad, anxious, embarrassed? And what would that be like? So those specific asks that we just talked about, that's a kind of effective communication. And what I mean by effective is just that it gets you closer to your goals in a way that respects you and the other person. So I'll share two different models that can help with effective communication. One for asking questions at the doctor's office, and one just more generally talking with friends and family. And this is another place where your background will really influence you. So your history and relationships, the way that you're used to talking to different people, are all going to play into your communication style. So I find that sometimes it can be helpful to have these kind of communication recipes ready if this doesn't all feel supernatural to you. So that first model is for when there's sort of an important topic that you want to raise with a healthcare clinician. And this model is called the C or SEA model. And it calls on us to make sure that we're being specific, explain why we're bringing up an issue to the provider, and then ask a question that essentially tells your provider, this is exactly what I need from you. So let's walk through a couple of examples. So let's say you're meeting with the social worker and you've been worried about how your child is doing after the diagnosis. You want to know what kinds of resources there might be for her. So someone might say, I'm a little worried about my daughter and all of this. There's a lot of ways that the social worker could sort of follow up with that, right? Maybe they ask you why you're worried and it starts a conversation, but maybe they also just sort of reassure you that, kids are typically resilient. I'm sure she's fine. And your real question didn't get answered. So using the C model, hopefully we can make it more clear to the social worker what our need is. So we could say something like, I'm worried my daughter is having a hard time with my wife's cancer. She's not doing as well in school as usual. Are there any resources we could connect her with to help her? So this is longer to say, and it's often not very natural, but it does make crystal clear what the concern is. And helps the social worker know exactly what you are looking for. And so hopefully gets you closer to your goal, which again is connecting your daughter with resources. Here's another quick example. So let's imagine you and your partner are navigating treatment decision making, and you want to know about how they might have a long-term impact on fertility. So especially when we get into the realm of sex, since it's taboo, people are often very uncomfortable and really try to beat around the bush to avoid the topic. But sex and family planning are incredibly important parts of our life, and they're entirely appropriate to discuss with your doctors. So someone who is sort of worried about coming to the point might ask, are there any long-term effects we should think about as a couple? And again, if you were the doctor responding to this, it's hard to know what that person is asking for, right? Maybe they want to know about survival statistics. It's hard to know what they're really asking for here. So how about instead, we would like to have children together someday. How will this treatment affect our fertility? And then a follow-up question being, is there anything we can do to protect our fertility? So again, hopefully helps you get closer to your goal and helps you get what you want and need from your providers. More broadly, that's sort of just a one narrow example of assertive communication more broadly. And so the best way that I can think about defining assertive communication is saying what it isn't. So along this sort of continuum, you have passive communication, which is you matter, I don't. Aggressive communication, which is I matter, you don't. The classic combination of passive-aggressive communication, which is neither of us matter, versus assertive communication, which is both of us matter. And when we sort of really stopping to take this perspective can help us when we're trying to sort of navigate a difficult interpersonal situation with somebody or communicate expectations and how someone else can meet those expectations. And again, when we talk about assertive communication in particular, there are families that really teach us one kind of communication, and it can be really difficult to try something new and to change the way we talk to one another. That can be really difficult, especially if who we're trying to deal with a difficult interpersonal situation is another family member who might not be sort of working from an assertive communication background. So just take this for what it's worth. But again, here's a model that can help with that. And that's, again, just sort of the background of your sort of family experience. So this is called the XYZ model. Psychologists love to name models, and that's the model for this one. So you can sort of look at how this model is similar or different to the C model that we talked about a minute ago. So it's broadly set up as when you X, I feel Y, I would prefer Z. So you're first pointing out a factual, objective behavior. It's sharing how that impacts you and being clear about what you would prefer. And this format, again, is respecting the other person because you're not interjecting your judgments and you're being clear, but it's also respecting you because it's clearly communicating what you need. And often this kind of approach also helps cut down on dispute. Not always, but sometimes it can help avoid arguments. So let's take an example. Let's say your brother comes to watch your mom while you take your kids to school in the morning and run errands, and your brother's been late the past 2 days. So you need to address this with him. So when you are late in the morning, I feel anxious about getting my kids to school on time. I need you here by 7:30 a.m. But if you're running late, I'd prefer you call me as soon as you can to let me know when you'll arrive. So just think about how starting a conversation like this, what does the rest of the conversation look like? And how does the next day look like? Does the brother end up showing up on time or calling the next day with this sort of approach versus passive? Something like, whenever you can get here, I guess I'm just happy for your help. or aggressive. You're always late. You never do anything right. You better be here 7:30 sharp tomorrow. Or passive aggressive, something like, wow, you're really helpful. Of these different possible conversation openers, which one is most likely to help make sure mom has someone to watch her, kids are at school on time, and keeps you and your brother on speaking terms? Probably the XYZ model, but I'll leave that up to you to decide. So last, before we talk about some additional resources and get to Q&A, just want to briefly address self-care. I know that this elicits a lot of eye rolls, and as you should. I'm sure you have been told a lot of times that, again, like the quote at the beginning, you have to take care of yourself. And I'm sure there are times where you think, great, one more thing I have to do, or how am I supposed to do that? And you're right. So I just want to set the record straight on self-care, and maybe this sort of new definition will fit a little bit more for you, but maybe it won't. But I do think it's worth addressing. So there's lots of misconceptions about self-care. Pop culture makes self-care out to be this sort of like luxury vacation or going to the spa. And those things are nice, and I would love those things for you. But it also makes self-care seem frivolous or inaccessible to the average person, or certainly to care partners with all of your responsibilities. So far from being frivolous, self-care is actually a radical act with roots in both social activism and spiritual practices. So activist Audre Lorde famously said, caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. Taking care of our mind, body, and spirit is a radical act when you're doing something that's difficult and underappreciated, but it's important to you and your values. And caregiving often fits that bill. So it's not about taking a dip in your private pool. Radical self-care looks much more mundane. It's like making sure that you've eaten lunch that day, taking your own medications, or making time for your own medical appointments. Working in small moments of joy and comfort, like putting on fuzzy socks at the end of a day, or asking for and receiving help when you need it. Reframed this way, I hope that self-care, meaning the things that you do to keep yourself healthy and well, comes to be seen more as something that all of us can do every day. And maybe this sort of approach or this kind of way of thinking of it isn't new to you, and maybe even reframing self-care in this way still doesn't feel feasible to you right now. But I do think it's important to emphasize that you are more than a care partner. You are a person. You deserve wellness too, however you may be able to find it. Okay, so I'm going to just end with a couple really quick resources. And I want to make sure that we have lots of time for any questions and answers. So Hope already walked you through all of the incredible resources available through the Lymphoma Research Foundation. This is absolutely where you got to start. And if you found us for this call, you probably already know about it, but it is just a wealth of different, ways to get information, get support. And I hope you will take a look through their resources. If you are, there are other organizations as well that have reliable, real information about lymphoma as well as other cancers. Those are the American Cancer Society and the National Cancer Institute. And these organizations also have cancer helplines and support and information. This one probably has a lot of you preemptively saying, like, I am not old enough for AARP, which is fine. But AARP also has a lot of resources and articles for family caregivers. For instance, they had this article a couple years ago about different apps that can be helpful. So I do encourage you, if you're looking for different sort of caregiving advice, they often have a lot of really interesting things available. Two sort of offbeat resource recommendations are the Cyber Guide and Libby. So the Cyber Guide has a whole compendium of mobile apps that can be help address different mental health concerns, depression, anxiety, stress, trauma, well-being. These aren't necessarily caregiving specific or cancer specific, but they can help sort of teach you different skills and help you with coping if that's something you're interested in. And then second is Libby. This may be a little silly, but I know you're spending a lot of time in lines and in the car and in the doctor's office. So, Libby is an app that connects you to your local public library for renting ebooks and audiobooks for free. You could search for caregiver memoirs. For instance, my little Southwestern Virginia library system has already toast that memoir that is so great. Or you can think about it in terms of self-care. So boosting sort of the number of enjoyable moments you have in a day. Is it comedy books, romance novels, anything to take your mind off of things for a little while. So I really love books and reading, and so this appeals to me, but certainly think about this also from different music apps or podcasts that are out there too. And then lastly, we know from a survey from the Center for Disease Control of family caregivers a few years ago that about 1 in 3 family caregivers have reported thinking about suicide. Suicidal ideation, meaning wishing you were dead or thinking about killing yourself, is really common. If you've ever experienced this, you are not alone. So I want to tell you about 988, which is our sort of new US National Lifeline number. It works just like calling 911. So if you call 988 from any phone, you'll be connected to a trained crisis counselor. A crisis is whatever you define it as. The Lifeline website specifically says no matter what problem you're dealing with, whether or not you're thinking about suicide, if you need someone to lean on for emotional support, call the Lifeline. This service is free. It is for everyone, and it is confidential. It's available 24 hours per day, 7 days a week. You can call the number from any phone. You can text to the number from a cell phone. You can go to their website and live chat online. Talking with someone about your thoughts and feelings can save your life. Please know this, tell your friends and family, and use it. So I will end here, and I just want to say a sincere thank you for all that you do. I hope that I'm not the first or last to tell you this, but you're a critical member of the healthcare team, and you're much more than that too. You're a person who deserves health, happiness, and respect. I wish this for you, and I thank you for all that you do in our shared mission to limit the harm of lymphoma. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Schaefer. I think that was a really thoughtful and a really important presentation. And we're going to use the rest of the time here for any questions that might come in. I know we did get one, so we're just going to start off here with that question. My mother was recently diagnosed with lymphoma and will soon start treatment. I'm prepared for the time commitment and the potential emotional burden, I think, but sometimes I'm not sure what to say to her. What do you find patients want to hear during this scary time?
Well, that's a really great question. And I think you're in the right place for even thinking about that. First of all, I think that's so individual. What your mom is going to want to hear is different than what someone else's mom wants to hear. But what we do know from the literature is that a lot of patients and caregivers kind of stop talking. Not altogether, but they stop talking about the tough stuff, and that both sides feel really cut off in that. It's called protective buffering, actually. It's I don't want to upset you, you don't want to upset me, so maybe we just don't talk about anything at all. We know that that limits you sort of your opportunity to have meaningful moments and to talk through really difficult situations like care planning or planning for the future, or someone's wishes. So I would just think about using maybe one of those sort of communication recipes, where you might sort of say, like, I know we might be going through some difficult times. I'm here if you want to bring up some difficult topics. And I want to respect you as well. If you don't want to talk about that with me, or I'm not the right person for you for that, but just know that I'm open to that. And I think the best thing that you can do is just make sure that there is sort of an open forum that each of you know sort of what they're willing and able to talk about.
Thank you. And we do have another question here, but if anyone wants to submit any more questions, just a reminder, you can do so in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So the next question here is, what are some examples of self-care and how can I continue living my life outside of being a care partner?
That is so great. And the good news is there are a lot of different options. And I would just think about self-care is really about, again, think about your mind, body, and spirit, and whatever that sort of means to you. And think about, what are the different buckets that are really important to you and how to fill those different buckets. So, mind, finding, are there little ways that you can find comfort? That those can be, and really, I like to think about a whole spectrum from teeny tiny 1 second, no or low cost to bigger investments as well. So are there things, again, I think I use the example of, like, do you have like a nice pair of slippers that just feel really good? And you make sure to put those on at the end of the day because it feels good and makes you comfortable. That's very small. All the way up to, are you willing and able to invest an hour a week in a support group, or reaching out to a therapist to help support your mental well-being? Again, that's more time commitment and it's not necessarily feasible for everybody, but those are some like big, there's a whole wide spectrum in between there. Body, think about, are you able to get a little bit of physical exercise in? That could be, I'm going to walk up the steps today, that one floor instead of take the elevator. It could be, I'm going to take a loop around, or I'm going to start sort of exercising every day. Again, there's a whole range of gamut. And then, of course, your spirit as well. Is it sort of connecting to things that are meaningful to you, staying on top of sort of your religious practices, all of those different things.
Thank you. Got a really great question here. As a patient, how can I most effectively express to others that I need their help? How do I ask them to be a caregiver?
That's a really important and helpful question. I think, again, really being as specific as possible. What are the different, maybe starting with that sort of asking for help list, is starting and make a list for yourself. What are the things that I really need help with? Do I need help with some of these practical tasks of getting to my appointments? I could really use someone's help wrangling my insurance. I could really help someone. If someone brought me a meal once a week, that would be really helpful. Emotional tasks, is there someone that I can call, when I'm feeling really low at the end of the day? And those kinds of things. What are the different tasks and aspects of things that would be helpful for you? And then listing out who is available in your network, near and far. Those folks who are farther away might be helpful with, sometimes folks can be helpful farther away with insurance, or even just being on the receiving line of a phone call. And then being really specific with folks of, I could really use help getting to my appointments. Is there any way you think that you could help me get to my appointment, either drive me there or pick me up? It's on Monday, they'll be on Monday, sort of whatever. Those kinds of things are trying to be as specific as possible can be one way to get started in on that.
Thank you. The next participant writes, my husband doesn't want to be with anyone but me when he's not feeling well. We don't have any family nearby. Friends offer to help, but I don't know what to ask for since my husband doesn't want other company. So I guess they're just wondering if you have any input in that.
Yeah, that can be really hard. I know it's so clear that you want to respect your husband's wishes and his journey. Um, but it sounds like maybe that is a lot for you too, and can be difficult for you too. Um, and so thinking about what are some of the things that make that difficult for you? Is it that you're really sort of 100%, you feel or are 100% responsible for that sort of emotional well-being when he's not feeling well? Or maybe it's really you're there to when he's sort of physically unwell, and there are some like physical aspects of it that are very difficult. And then thinking about what are ways that might help you if he's not willing to accept sort of support from other people. Are there ways that you can get support for providing that support, if that makes sense? So if the sort of emotional toll of it is really difficult for you, are there people in your network who can be kind of steam outlets for you, where you can call them after he goes to bed and say, look, tonight was just awful and I just want to talk about it? Or someone who can sort of take you, say, look, I want to go out for a movie tomorrow, and someone who will go with you to sort of pick you up after those moments. Or are there, if it's really untenable, are there ways to sort of start the discussion, maybe using that XYZ model of, when you're having a really low evening, there's been more of them recently, and it's hard for me. I feel like I'm not really able to meet all of those needs, and it can be hard for me too. Are there, are there anything, we can do to sort of split that up, or sort of trying to get creative, or at least opening the door to conversation around that, since it sounds like it's been pretty tricky.
Thank you. I think those are really helpful suggestions. Our next question here is, do you have some additional suggestions for dealing with an uncommunicative oncologist? We have no option but to change, or we have no option to change doctors or facilities. Our oncologist is young but very traditional, i.e., do as I tell you and don't ask questions.
Oh, that's a tough one, and I really feel for you. Um, I would think about, there's a couple of different things that come to my mind. So, one, if there happens to be support resources like a social worker or a nurse, who you feel sort of aligned with or can talk to about with this, um, there might be some people who need to know that the doctor is sort of acting like this, and not sort of in a way that's not resonating with all the patients. So it might be helpful to sort of discuss privately with someone else who's trusted in that care team. Sounds like that might not be a possibility for you. Another a option just for working with a doctor like that is just really trying to be a bit of a broken record. If, let's say, there are three options for some treatment, and one of those just really isn't working for you, is just really using that C model, the SEA, of be specific. Like, this treatment isn't working for me because I am too ill. That keeps me from doing my job. And what other treatment pathways are there for us, and just being really specific. And if they're very rigid and keep saying, no, you have to do this, you just keep asking the question. So I don't mean to laugh. It is not easy, but see how you can, like, be persistent. Your needs matter. ultimately they are there to collaborate with you. What is best for you guys should be best for them as well as the provider. You are on the same team. So just keep being a broken record about your needs and being as specific and explaining why these things are important to you can be really helpful.
Thank you. And I think we're going to squeeze in one last question here because I don't think we've really addressed it. Do you have any advice for spouses acting as care partners? How can you switch between being a care partner and being a spouse? I find my caregiving role makes me feel almost in a parental role to my spouse.
You know, I just want to tell you that you are not alone. I hear this over and over and over. This is so common. And I will not do this question justice, so I really apologize. But are there ways to still find intimate moments to, again, sort of think about like, we're going to sit on the porch and we're going to hold hands, and we're going to have just like a small, intimate, romantic moment, and trying to just work little pieces of that relationship back in, even if right now more of the relationship is around helping them be well and being in more of a parental figure, of providing care. But hopefully you can find little ways to still have some of that intimacy with your partner, because that really is something that is hard to lose.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Schaefer, for your presentation and for answering all of our questions today. I want to thank everyone, of course, for joining today's webinar. And please remember, if anyone who joined has any additional questions, you can reach out to our helpline at 800-500-9976 and also take advantage of all of the resources Dr. Schaefer discussed today. But with that, thank you so much again, Dr. Schaefer. This is a great program.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here, and I hope hopefully I was able to share one or two things that were helpful for people today.
Absolutely. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.